Aerobics is one of the words you hear bandied about everywhere when it comes to exercise, and also a cardiovascular or cardio workout that is so misunderstood. It's misunderstood by the public, it's misunderstood by many doctors, it's misunderstood even by a lot of personal trainers. So while they are different, the aerobic system is about moving oxygen around the body, and oxygen in particular to your muscles, and cardio is about the heart. Really, you can't separate them, because if you are working one, you're kind of working the other. You wouldn't isolate one from the other. So if you ever hear the word cardio exercise, cardiovascular, or whether you hear aerobic, it's kind of one and the same thing. The first thing to realize is you are working it right now. While you're watching it, you are working your cardio system. Your heart is beating, you're moving oxygen around your blood, so you're doing it already. So pat yourself on the back, feel good about yourself, because you're already doing a cardio workout. But therefore, why do anything different? Well, we want to work it a little bit harder. But this is where everybody goes wrong. You see people running flat out on a running machine, or jogging down the road, or cycling really hard and panting and panting and panting. Well, the second that your breathing increases, that means you're not taking in enough oxygen, so you're no longer working your aerobic system, you're working anaerobically. So the window of increasing your aerobic workout is less than most people think. You're not trying to overdo it. And I think, and all the doctors most of the doctors I work with agree, that to work your aerobic system properly, you really need to invest in either a watch that's got a heart rate monitor on it or a heart rate strap. Because you need to work out, first of all, either estimate or with your personal trainer, work out what your maximum heart rate is, and then work to a certain percentage of that heart rate. If you go too high, you're not really working your aerobic system. And when I share this with so many people, they go, oh, this is fantastic. I don't do any jogging, or I don't go cycling, because when I've done it in the past, I hated it so much because I'm out of breath the whole time. And I go, well, that's not what you're trying to do. You've got to slow it down, slow down the heart rate. You're looking at only sort of 65 up to probably 75% of your maximum heart rate to start off with in exercising. And even at the end, as you get super fit, you don't want to be going over 80%, because then you're going anaerobic. And for most people, up to 80%, you aren't even breathing deeply. You can carry on having a really nice conversation. And that is actually working your aerobic, not the panting flat out. That's working something totally different. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, because when you're running really fast, you're almost sprinting, while you're not working your aerobic system, you are working those big leg muscles, which is going to give you more muscles, which again is super beneficial. But the good news is aerobics, just remember this, you're always doing it when you're breathing. You can go too far and stress too hard the body. That is not aerobics at all. It's at a much slower heart rate than what most people realize. And then what does happen, and this is fascinating, and this is why it's so good for longevity. If you slow let's say you're jogging, by the way, it wouldn't matter whether you're jogging indoor, outdoor, whether you're on a bicycle, indoor, outdoor, or on a rowing machine or swimming. They're all aerobic works out. If you can make sure you're doing it at a slow enough heart rate, what happens is over time, your aerobic system develops and develops and develops. So now what happens is you're not working any harder at all, because you're working to your heart rate. You get faster, you get quicker, you get more output. And then a month later, you'll notice all of a sudden that, let's say you were running, 12-minute miles in that zone. By doing enough of it, so do more hours of it, but not hard, not strenuous at all, just working at, say, 70% of your heart rate. Pick a number on your heart rate monitor, 70% maybe of your max, train at that. If you're breathing heavy, then that's not 70% of your max, come down, pick another heart rate, train at something that's really, really comfortable. And it's going to be 65, 70% of your max. Train at that and keep doing it. And it's easy. Keep doing it. Don't overdo it, but 2, 3, 4, whatever suits you, whatever works for you. And what you're aiming to do, and this is fascinating, it's so delightful when it first happens. The third or fourth time you go out, you'll realize, when you look at your watch or your heart rate monitor, you realize for the same heart rate, you're now going quicker. And what that demonstrates, for no extra effort, you're getting more output. You have proven to yourself beyond doubt, beyond question, that you've improved your aerobic system. And I didn't believe this at first, because I was one of those fast joggers that just ran so fast, but I never lost any weight. I was always ill. I hated it because I was panting. And what's been proven to me now scientifically, that all those years, I did this for like 30 years, was a complete waste of time. Complete waste of time. Slow down the heart rate, which I've done now, and I'm just getting quicker and quicker for the same slow heart rate. More bang for your bucks. Anyway, enough of me talking about aerobics. Let's hear from a real expert, that is Christian Daly.
Zone 1, during the times when I was doing lots of my study, what you would see was most of the training that world-class athletes and people who were recovering from lots of metabolic health conditions, or who were training for health, and you can almost remember this to longevity. Athletes and people who exercise the right intensities, etc., tend to live longer. You know, there's great studies on cyclists and runners, and also the treatment of conditions with sort of exercise-related activity, and they tend to live, can be anything from 5 to 10 years longer. Certainly have that length of time of better general health.
Yeah.
And
so long sort of lifespan and health span.
Healthy lifespan, or health span, yes,
yeah.
exactly. So both things really. You want to live a long and healthy life, and then one day just spend the last few months of your life not. Yeah. You just don't want to have this long continual decline over about 20 years. So this is what this allows us to do. But what you'd find is that most of the time it was somewhere between about 70 and 80% of your max heart rate or max strength that people would actually work in. And this allows you to train regularly, allows you to train with a good amount of volume in your training. It's a really optimal intensity to make a lot of those physiological changes. And so, for example, if we were to take, say, an example of Emma, or some of the athletes that we train, or any of the people that we train, we ultimately get them most of the time to sit at around about 75% of their max heart rate quite a lot of the time. What's interesting about that is that when people first start, they find it almost impossible to do that because they have such poorly developed aerobic systems. Yeah. Even athletes we get coming into us asking for help. Yeah. And what you find is they're so anaerobically trained that they've not developed that underpinning health, which is in those low intensity aerobic exercise where all the mitochondrial biogenesis, etc., takes place. As soon as what we'll do is we get them on a mission to make this aerobic health keep in line with their anaerobic health, and when that happens, you have a very different athlete who can almost repeat performances day in, day out, all the time, and they tend to kick on massively from that, because that's a long-term energy system that you're developing there. But that is within what we term Zone 1.
So Zone 1's that sort of, into some people I'd go, it doesn't even feel like exercise, but that's that heart rate. About 75%.
It's centred around there between 70 and 80%.
Brilliant.
It's the sweet spot, and
and some people might find that easier than they expect.
It's very easy to train. I mean, it's very comfortable to train there. It is very comfortable, but the physiological effect is huge. Yeah. And what you're doing there is you're setting the preconditions for anything else that's stressful on top of that. That's what's missing. People tend to just stay at high intensities and they have nothing to underpin it. We make sure that aerobic foundation and that strength foundation, which is between 70 and 80% of your max lift as well, which when you eventually find out what that is, obviously, around that sweet spot there, you can make huge development there in terms of coordination and your strength and your ability to build muscle, and you can do that for long periods of time, for months and years, etc. And you can continually to build that over time. So like I said, that aerobic system work is just absolutely incredible, and it underpins everything else. And so that's Zone 1. The strength's done in Zone 1, and also we would have, say, certain foods, etc., that we would eat just exactly like we do, that we would class them as Zone 1 foods as well. So the whole thing centres around there. In the academic literature, it would be termed Zone 1. So we just really liked the name, so we took it, said that's basically what we do. We spend probably 90% of our life in there, and then what we do is we set those preconditions, these healthy preconditions. Like I said before, healthy people adapt to higher intensities. That's what we find all the time with the work. If you've got these preconditions right and you put in something higher intensity, maybe in that 5 or 10% of the time when you do that, you make even more adaptations, but that's like the icing on the cake.
Yeah.
And then they can kick on even more. So it's about setting those preconditions. You tend to find that people make such massive gains. Remember, when you go into zone 1 and you start there, you actually start there. Maybe you can only walk in there because you're not aerobically fit, but because you make those cellular changes and those muscular changes, you get faster and faster and faster for that given heart rate, without having to work any harder, or certainly put in any more
Let me
effort.
just clarify that, because that was, when I was first told that was your approach, I went, have I got that right? And I went, oh my crikey, that is so ingenious. What you're saying is, let's say you've just recovered from a stroke or an illness, or you might be in your 70s and say, I've got to make a difference. You start off and you get to that 75% of your maximum heart rate, and you might be at that point a very slow walk. But you're then saying, for the same energy over time, as your diet gets better, your sleep gets better, we start getting you metabolically well, you now are walking faster. And then a couple of years later, for the same heart rate, you might be starting to jog. And then eventually you're jogging a bit faster, but always for that same expenditure of effort. And therefore, as the coach, that person's getting healthier, because you're not pushing them to their limits. It's very much get that heart rate there, work in that zone, and if we see you getting quicker, we know you're getting better, basically.
That's exactly it. So you might have someone that starts off at let's say they're 18-minute miles for a walk, and then eventually they're down and they're running, and they're at 75% of their max heart rate. Then over weeks and weeks, they end up at 15 minutes per mile. So they've gone down 3 minutes. They're 3 minutes quicker, but they're actually still at the same heart rate. But they're just making physiological changes in there. And then over time they might decide to start to walk and to jog, or to walk jog and things like that. And that same person could quite easily within a year be actually running at 9 or 10 minute miles for exactly the same heart rate as they were 18-minute mile walking. Wow. Just maybe a year before that or something like that. So it is absolutely incredible. That also acts for us as a bit of a health check. So we know that the changes that you make biologically or cellularly during that is things like mitochondrial biogenesis, for example. Those are anti-aging mechanisms, and they help prevent conditions, and they're involved with longevity, etc. That's more mitochondria within the cell that produces the energy currency, adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, which drives all the kind of cellular energy production and all the muscle function and all kind of function in the human body that is there. But we know the same thing, this same aerobic thing that does this. That means it's like anti-aging, and it's so this is almost an example of a metabolic health score that you get. So the better aerobic system you develop, the more youthful you're keeping yourself, because naturally, if you don't train that system, it will naturally degrade over time. It's the same as you get older. It just goes. It's the same as strength. I know how strength within that zone, when you develop it there, you can do loads of it. We know that strength declines, like we said before. You end up with things like age-related muscle decline, which is called sarcopenia, which also can have an impact on things such as osteopenia or osteoporosis. It's obviously bone density issues, etc. You need to keep your muscles good. You need to keep because muscle pulls on the tendons pull on the bone forms more bone. So you need to make sure to keep you, and your nutrition's got to be bubbling away as well. So you need to be strong, and you need to make sure you're getting enough of the right nutritions in, which is a lot to do with stuff such as protein, which is because bone, people don't realise that bone is about 40% protein, and you need to make sure you keep those muscles good if you want to keep yourself young, and then you can move. That allows you to move more, to walk more, to run more, etc. And this whole thing just bubbles away, and it keeps you youthful. And it's almost like it provides us with what we have as a metabolic health score, and underpins everything else. So it's fascinating.
So if I've got it right, it's a bit like the metabolic health score that we do on the 5 internal metabolic measures, but you're doing the physical measures.
Yeah.
We're not pushing people too hard. We're taking those 4 pillars that we call MARS. So we are looking at movement, how you move, aerobic, some resistance, as in lifting heavier things to keep the muscles going. And I loved you said right at the beginning, stance, how you sit, how you stand, your posture and all that's so important. So it's those 4 elements of Mars measured and all the time trying to stay around that zone 1, certainly for most people.